All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And Ben, we are deep into the winter series and have we got an excellent episode for you today, folks. But before we get there, welcome to you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Now, always love these episodes where we unpack real life stories, real life examples around how they're unlocking their potential and creating financial peace. So it's an absolute honour and privilege to listen in to these shows.
It is, mate, and it's kind of like, it's all right for you and Bryce to do it or you and Ben to do it, but at least we hear from people who are actually applying the principles and doing it in their own life, which is amazing. So without any further ado, let's cut to the interview you and I had recently with one of our very own TPC listeners.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, Ben, we've got another very special guest today appearing on our winter series of the Property Couch. We are talking to Property Couch listener Jason Bird. Welcome to the Property Couch, Jason.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Hey, there's a fair bit for us to talk about for you, and not just property and finance, which we'll get into in a little bit. So just let our community know you definitely want to stick around for this. But before we get into some of the finer parts of your backstory, let's go right back to the beginning, Jason, and let us know what conversations around money were like in your house growing up.
Yeah, look, we talked about money all the time. My parents were really, really open about everything, not just property or in their mortgages and the finances, but bills and having to get a second job because they were in a recession, all of those things that was communicated. And I think the reason for that is because we were pretty inquisitive as kids. There was a stage where the recession hit and mum and dad were business owners and it kind of all fell apart. And so our lifestyle changed a bit. And so, of course, we had a whole bunch of questions. And I remember many times sitting there with mum because she was the one home. Dad was always working. And, saying, what's happened? Why have things changed? And mum just shared everything, interest rates, mortgage payments, dad having to get a second job, mum having to work from home, while looking after my younger sister. And so there was a lot of questions and a lot of really open answers, which I'm so grateful for because that, obviously teaches you a lot as a young person.
So in terms, can you give us the household composition? So How many other siblings?
So 5 other siblings, 6 of us all together. I'm the second youngest, so we had a really full house. And at that moment where I said things changed, we were in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home. Wow. So things were very colourful. Mum was also doing family daycare.
Yeah. So Jason, before the change, before what sounds like the business failure for your mum and dad, how was life before that in terms of with their business?
The business starting and failing happened very quickly. Prior to that, my parents were just regular workers. We moved over from the UK when I was very, very young, and my parents were able to, from selling their home in the UK, they were able to buy their home here. They built their first home here, and they owned it outright. And my parents decided to start a business, which is like a family takeaway restaurant. And it happened as quickly as they started it. The recession hit and things kind of went pear-shaped. So things changed very, very quickly for us. And so as a kid, I remember having to kind of grapple with my lifestyle changing quite a bit. And it wasn't so much that mum and dad were, we were wealthy prior to that. It was just, we had a bigger home and we had plenty of space and, went to private schools and things like that. So there was quite a few changes, and we weren't poor by any means. Like, we always had a roof over our head, plenty of food on the table. Mum and Dad were awesome like that. They made it work all the time. But there was a lot of conversations about, why we didn't have the cool things our mates did at the time. And it was very enlightening to have those conversations. As upset as I was at the time to have them, but yeah, it was good.
So as you reflect on that time now, Jason, and look back and see that your mum was really transparent and open to you, how do you view those conversations now? Because through the eyes of I'm making assumptions here, but you were a teenager. They can be quite overwhelming, or they can be liberating. And which way did you go with that information early, particularly about the struggles, not just the general conversations around money?
I didn't. As a young person, understanding it was. It made sense to me that the reasons, we were going out without a few things, they made sense to me. But, my attitude towards it wasn't great at the time. It was all seemed a bit unfair, selfishly. But one thing I could definitely see was that Mum and Dad were working themselves, to the bone. They were doing everything they could. And, you didn't have to be a genius to see that with such a large family and so many mouths to feed that it was difficult. So there was a lot of understanding, I think, even from a young age from all of us.
Yeah. So okay. So you're seeing this real life experience of challenge through the recession. What were the takeaways that you were getting from that in terms of managing your money, budgeting, ways that you would apply some of the things that you were seeing via osmosis, via having the conversations, and how that impacted on your ability to save money or spend money or somewhere in between?
Yeah, that's a good question. We definitely learnt really quickly. The first thing I made a point of was I will never start a business by mortgaging my home. That was the first thing. It wasn't just the mistakes that we learnt from. It was also kind of, I decided very, very young that I wasn't going to become that person that worked as hard as my parents did. I didn't want to have to work as hard as they did. And so I learned from their mistakes as well, and they taught me lots about property and how it works and how finances work and how budgeting works and that sort of thing. But I also learned that I just didn't want to work until retirement and get two jobs and have my partner work and have my kids miss out on things. It was something that I decided, I was like, this is not going to be for me. So I guess that's the biggest thing I took away from that.
Can we get some context around when the family home needed to be sold to pay for obviously the losses in the business?
Yeah.
Did we rent straight, or did we buy something just in a different area, and so we still had a mortgage when the eight of you were living in a 3-bedroom house?
Yeah, we did still have a mortgage. Mum and Dad sold and bought, but we went from a 5-bedroom house with 3 living areas to a 3x1 with with very, very modest size in size.
One living area in a backyard, it sounds
exactly.
like. So,
Yeah.
we also like to ask, that's the picture for you. Like you said, at the end of the day, I want to work smarter, not harder, sounds like the story here, in terms of I want to find a way that it doesn't require me to basically have the same sort of level of exertion that you saw your mum and dad doing around working 2 jobs, etc., to raise a large family.
Yeah.
What about your brothers and sisters? Because there's always an interesting study when you're growing up in that same sort of bubble that is your home. Are your sisters and brothers different to money management in terms of how they approach money to you?
Yeah, I think we were all different many ways. I think I was probably the most inquisitive when it came to money and asking. I was really curious about budgeting. And so I would say I'm probably still the one that thinks of money the most. But I had three older siblings, and there was a bit of a gap between my brother and I, and then again a little gap between myself and my younger sister. And it's interesting to see the dynamic shifting between the three that are very similar, the older ones, and then my brother and I again very similar, not just with money, but in all kinds of the way we live our lives, our personalities, etc. And then my sister again a little bit different. So I think as life takes you through stages, my parents were going through different stages of parenthood and finances and reaching their own personal goals, I guess. And so yeah, we are similar in those three groups of the siblings.
Cohorts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, cohorts.
So tell us then. Okay, so you're going through. So there's a fair bit going on throughout your teenage life, and some adjustments that need to be made, and some observations that you're creating, and then you're the most curious about budgeting. So what does that look like as you get to your first job and you get independence? Because there's I don't know what your first job was, but I know what your most high profile job was that I can think of around this late teen, early 20s. So what was that?
Yeah. My first full-time job was I worked for a music shop, Sanity, and I was a store manager there. And so I was performing straight out of high school. I went over to Singapore and did a stint there as a Prince impersonator, and I came home and got knuckled into working full-time and got a management position pretty young. Was making decent money, and I was putting money away for me buying my first property, my first home. And then things quickly changed. I auditioned for Popstars, when I was 20, and things changed really quickly then. So I only had about a year of working and saving prior to that, where I was working as a retail manager and earning pretty good money for my age. I think at the time it was definitely comparable to what I was earning as a recording artist. It was probably, if memory serves me, I think I was earning a bit more as a retail manager.
All right, so let's expand that a little bit. So, for those who don't understand, Popstars was one of the original talent shows, reality TV shows back in 2001. I think you won, if that's
Yeah,
right.
correct.
Was it the year before where Sophie Monk won it in her season, the
Yeah,
season
that's
before?
right. Yeah, Bardo
So,
was the first. Yeah,
Bardo. So you guys were scandalous.
yeah,
And so you all of a sudden you would have been experiencing this incredible ride that for people looking back now, reality TV is just every second program, but back then it was some pioneering stuff. So
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? You go from managing Sanity to turning up at the Arias in 2001 as a group, probably one of the highest profile groups in the country at the time.
Yeah, it all happened very quickly, just like that. And fortunately, I'd seen the Popstars series with Bardo. It was the year before. Obviously, it was just for girls, which I was pretty bummed about at the time. But when the second series came up, I was a little familiar with it, but it was definitely the first of its kind in terms of those big reality shows where they pump out artists and recording deals and that sort of thing. So there wasn't a great deal of precedent to kind of refer to in terms of the success. Bardo had just kind of got signed, and they were doing really well at the time. So you just think, oh, this is it. This is it for me. I nailed it. But I auditioned. I'd moved to Melbourne to try and crack the industry at the time. I auditioned there, and along with another, I think, 12,000 people at the time. And it was a grueling process, really fun. But made it to the end and got through to the group, got given a contract, didn't know what to do with it, but signed it anyway. Things changed really quickly. We started recording and the workouts and the touring and the interviews, and we toured the UK, and it was massive couple of years, massive.
And
And
give
to
us,
build some context around that, sorry, Ben, just to build some context, Australian Idol was 2003, right? So you're
Yeah,
even pre-Australian Idol. So,
correct.
sorry, Ben, you were saying?
You know, I was just going to say, give us some context around, so touring Australia, what sort of audiences were you performing in front of? And then obviously in the UK, did you have similar sized audiences, or were they the sort of promo tours as opposed to the sort of big concert venues?
Look, the thing about Popstars is that it was a really, really big show, and everyone seemed to be watching it. So, typically you think a pop group like we were, a bunch of young people together in a pop group, you'd have a really young following, and we did have that. But the TV show was just this vehicle for exposing us to everybody. So we had all ages, all kinds of people that were turning up to our CD signing that we did. That when you go around the country and you're outside in the shopping mall and you've got seas of people and you've got to sign every single one of their CD covers. So we met all kinds of people, and it was really nice to see that. Yeah, we had a very diverse group of following, which was nice. But then we went to the UK. To answer your question, Ben, we were part of a sort of Popstars International touring group. So we toured with the UK pop stars, who were huge over there at the time, obviously, and the German pop stars, and there was us. And so we played to the biggest venues in the UK, and they were all sold out. Massive, massive crowds, thousands upon thousands sold out every night in the biggest venues in the UK. So that was a huge, huge experience for me, and something, tick that box off. It was like got to play in Manchester Arena. It was incredible.
Yeah, with tens of thousands of people in there. So hence tick that box. That's a life dream
Definitely.
right there.
Yeah.
So, Jason, that must have been Nirvana then, right? You're on telly, you're doing packed stadiums, you're traveling around the world. You must have been creaming it in. You must have, the money must have been flowing like rivers of gold, I'm sure.
I love it. I wish. No, like I said, mate, I was earning, I think, from memory, slightly less than I was earning as a retail manager. So there was a lot of eye-opening experiences during that time. As much as we had fun, money was not part of the deal that we were fist pumping about. We got to live our dream, absolutely, and we got to do some really amazing things. But the perk was not the cash. That was for sure. Yeah, and all the money that we made, it's the way it works in the industry. It's you're advanced, and so you got to pay back.
This is really important to understand. So they're still putting you up, I'm suspecting, in pretty good hotels. Would it be sort of 4-star, 5-star type hotels?
For the most part, while we were in Australia, we rented, and we paid our own rent through the small amount of cash that we were given as an advance on a weekly basis. So
Yeah.
at the time, it was pretty crazy. We were pretty well known, as you said, and so we had people camping outside our homes and stuff like that, and paparazzi and things like that, having to deal with that every day. You couldn't just live on a street front home, and you had to have sort of security and live in an apartment off the ground floor and that sort of thing. So rent wasn't cheap in Sydney City. Trying to have that sort of security and that sort of that protection, and we were responsible for our own living expenses.
So let me get it right. You couldn't choose where you got to live, but they took it out of your allowance as part of the contract. And then, so obviously, we have, as consumers, we see you guys doing your thing and we're thinking, great, they're probably off to some nightclub now and they'll have free drinks and they'll have food everywhere and they'll be put up in 5-star hotels on their tours. But potentially all of that was then deducted from the salary that they paid you.
Correct. It was. And, it's not a secret that most bands, when they're touring, that's where they make their money, minus their management fees, 10 to 20%. You make your money from touring and your merchandise and things like that while on tour, your gigs, your TV gigs, your appearances. None of that came to us. We just got a weekly advance, and the rest of it went to pay for a TV show.
Wow.
So back then, who was in control of the strings there? Was it the television networks, or was it the music label?
It was the television network. So we were owned by a network, and not managed by a record company. We were signed to a record company for distribution only, which is something that independent artists do now, but it's on their own terms, which is works very, very differently. But we were owned and managed by a TV company. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so is that what caused the sort of abrupt end of, in terms of Scandalous? So you've had all this promotion. Were the record sales still holding up, or were they starting to wane, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's just, we're done here?
Look, they were holding up. Like I said, we just got back from a huge UK tour and had lots of interest over there for, opportunities to release in the UK. We were received really well over there. And the day we returned to Australia was the day of the Arias, and we took home an ARIA award that night. We did a homecoming concert on Sydney Harbour and had thousands of people across the harbour on a floating stage, and we played an awesome gig. We were fully pumped. We'd been writing our second album, which we didn't get the opportunity to do for the first album because it was such a short time frame. But we're all musicians and songwriters, so we worked really hard on developing our next step. And we got off that floating stage, and we were told that was it.
That's it.
It was our homecoming concert. So things were really good for us at the time. So it was a massive, massive shock. And being so young, I was only 21 at the time. It was really difficult to process.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is pre-social media too, so you don't even have the luxury of building up a big following, which a lot of the reality TV show people has as their front of mind reason for going on these days. But how do you manage egos? How do you get pulled from obscurity, win a contest, which in itself is an incredible mountain, and then you get thrust into this world where from the outside it looks like you are living the life of the Rolling Stones, but the bank account is saying no, you're actually being quite strongly controlled. And then there's 5 people all in a band who have come together, who are all trying to find their place in the world at that age, whilst being in front of people, whilst being on stage. Is that how did water find its own level in that?
Yeah. Look, I guess we all 5 of us were real family sort of oriented. We came from really humble beginnings, and we had our families around us the whole time. And we just never let it get to that point. We kept grounded the whole time. When things ended, it was a shock. But as much as we didn't know what the next step was, we were hopeful. And it wasn't until you kind of read that contract again for the second time that you realise there's quite a lot of restrictions even after the band was over. We didn't have a lot of options in terms of what our next steps could be. So it was difficult. Having said all of that, it was, with hindsight, I don't look back at it as a negative experience at all. I didn't make any money, but I achieved some incredible things. I've got stories for days, that my grandkids will hear about one day, and friendships and connections that I made, and we broke records, Australian music records, and I've got an aria and some wicked memories. So yeah, as negative as it sounds, the experience for me was like I wouldn't change it. Yeah.
And are you still in contact with the other band members?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
That's the thing, friends for life, like you when you bond over something that unique, and really life-changing, you kind of have that connection forever, I think.
Oh, 100%. No, that
And so we need to close this out though, don't we? Like, ultimately there was an interest to go on, but because the contract basically had you hamstrung in terms of trying to do this yourself or signing with other labels,
Yeah.
they effectively, they owned the brand, they owned the talent under the brand, and that ultimately meant that the brand had to die based on their determination because they owned you effectively.
Yeah, correct, Ben. You've absolutely nailed it. So they owned the
Okay.
brand. Scandalous, then they also owned us individually
Yeah.
as far as an option. They had first option on our
Yeah.
next projects as individuals. So yeah, it was we had choices, but they weren't the ones that a lot of people would assume we'd have. They were
Yeah.
quite limited. Yeah, so yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, clearly we could go down that path for quite some time to try and unpack some of those stories. That'd be a little bit of fun. But if we try and nudge it back to where we went, we had a backstory of understanding money through your family. You've had this incredible experience, but limited financial outcome from it. So, what's the pivot after that? How do you reconcile all of that and then go, hey, I've been curious about budgeting for a long time. I've been curious about money for a long time. How do you get your mindset back on track? And did it take a while to land the plane from, like, let's be honest, like there's a lot of people with big profiles who struggle when the crowds disappear, right? So
Yeah.
there's got to be an element of that you needed to navigate.
Yeah, definitely. But for me, it I just looked at my engagement with Popstars as another job at the time. I was working as an entertainer as well as working in retail, so I looked at it as another job, and I just went full force into like, okay, I'm going to buy my first home. That was my plan prior to landing the gig, and so nothing was going to change for me. I just ran into an issue there as well because yeah, it was around the time where we had a property boom. It was, the early 2000s, and over here in Perth, there was, house and land was the hot ticket, and there was a lot of my siblings and friends and my parents were talking about, getting a house and land package and unlocking instant equity. By the time you got your keys, you'd have sort of $50,000 sitting there of equity that you could use to leverage, and that sounded perfect to me. It was exactly what I wanted to do. So I kind of jumped full force into that. And while all this, on and off stage business was happening on one side, I was kind of working with my bank back here in Perth and trying to get it, that all sorted out. So I picked out a block and a home and got a pre-approval from a bank and was all ready to go. And I went through to LMI and got declined because I didn't realise at the time, but I had a family member who had a telephone bill in my name and didn't pay it. So that was really tough. I got declined at the LMI level. Everything I had pre-start sorted and all of that sort of stuff. So it was
Wow.
that was
Now,
a hard
did you get
reality.
any coaching around that to basically get your brother to write a stat deck to say that it was actually my phone and to
You
clear
know
your credit
what?
file?
I did kind of start that process, but look, it's really different now. Obviously, there's lots of
Yeah,
ways now to get around a default on your credit file. But for me back then, being as busy as I was, it just seemed like a really big task. And I was
yeah.
just told, look, you got 7 years of this default. So there was a good chunk where I wasn't able to get a mobile phone in my name and that sort of thing. And
Huh.
here I am jumping on a stage in Manchester Arena, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's terrible, but it's also a good little reminder for our community that credit files and credit scores matter, unfortunately, and so
yeah,
there's often common stories around people in share houses where phone accounts were set up. Now these days you really don't have a landline anymore,
yeah.
so lots of the phone contracts are in personal names. But if anyone ever asks you to go and co-sign on a contract of a utility bill or any type of bill, be really careful of your obligations under joint and several liabilities here because that is real, and you can find yourself in a situation like you did, Jason, which is, what? how, when, bro, what have you done?
Exactly.
And then as you say, life just gets slowed down for you until such time as you can improve. Back in those days, it used to be called just your credit file. Now we've adopted, positive credit scoring and negative credit scoring here. So that's a little bit easier to navigate. But back then, when I was broking, someone who had something on their credit file was like, what's the backstory? Because we've got to go in for a big fight to try and mitigate it and get it removed from your credit file.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, it's absolutely right. Massive, massive lesson learned. So I thought that was an important part of the story to tell, even though it wasn't good for me at the time, and it was something I didn't really want to talk about, obviously publicly or even share it with friends. I was quite embarrassed about the whole thing, even though it wasn't my fault. But I think it is an important lesson, and I certainly would never, without incredible thought or making sure that I put the right things in place, lend my credit or become guarantor for just anybody. So I think that's a really important lesson.
So you're about 22 or 21 at this point when this happens, and you're managing for 7 years to get that clear. How did you manage that 7 years? How was that playing on your mind, and what did you do during that time?
Yeah, look, to be honest, not a lot. I just worked, and after things ended with our contract, I remained in Sydney for a while, and I was really lucky. Actually, we were talking about things changing, and a lot of things didn't change for me. I was really fortunate to keep working in the industry and get some more really amazing opportunities, and not have to go and get an office job or back to retail or anything. For me, I really was lucky enough to be able to sustain an income through the industry, and so I just concentrated on that, building up a resume and getting sort of those boxes ticked and enjoying my life as an entertainer. And during that time, it was difficult. Like I said, I couldn't really get a mobile phone for a while. The only debt that I could get was sort of bad debt, like things like car loans and things. So I bought myself a BMW.
Of course you did.
Yeah, because that's what I could do. And so I was like, why not enjoy that? And I did. But fast forward past that 7 years, and I just got back on the horse. And I was running my own business, doing it as an entertainer and booking other bands and a choreographer as well, working on TV and things like that. And I also worked a 9 to 5 just to kind of get as much of that income in as possible. And it allowed me to get my first property.
Isn't that ironic, Ben, that you've got a scenario where there's someone who's saved a deposit, genuinely wants to buy a house for an appreciating asset, and that, no. Oh, but you want a BMW? No problem.
Yes.
Why didn't you ask earlier?
A depreciating asset that usually runs off at about 16 to 20% per annum, as opposed to an appreciating house that usually appreciates at around 6% per annum. It could have been a life change. Mind you, good news here, Jason. We're going from Pain Island to Pleasure Island on this story.
Yes.
So the BMW's got the choreography. What was the show again that you were doing all of the dance choreography for?
So You Think You Can Dance, Australia.
There we go. So You Think You Can Dance as well. So you're being able to do all of these types of things. So when did the big switch come in terms of, okay, that it was wonderful, I've been able to, continue on my career in that area, and then when did things start getting super serious about, your wealth building journey?
It was around that time. It was once that 7-year period had finished, and I knew that I wasn't going to have any more barriers ahead of me. And I was like pushing 30 at that point. So I was like, I've got to get started real quick, because this was something I was keen to do when I was in my early 20s. So, I really pushed forward. And at that stage, I still had the idea of building. And it probably wasn't the best idea. I bought a block of land in a not so great suburb, but it was something I could afford, and I was kind of easing my way into managing mortgages and debt and things like that. And I was about to build, and I realised that I did a soil test, and there was clay in the soil because I was up in Armidale, and I quickly decided to bail on that. I ended up selling the block, making a profit on it. I had a sister who's an incredible real estate agent, and was able to sell the block for me. And so I made a bit of money on it, and I got the whatever expenses I had on it, I got all of that back. And in the meantime, I was still saving. So I used that to put a decent deposit on my next purchase, which was a 2-bedroom villa built in 1979, the same time as me, in original condition in Como. So that was the next step.
So for those out of context, Como is next to South Perth, so
Yeah.
it's borders the freeway and the river, and it's nice and close to the city. So the land value is pretty high. But did you say the first one was in Armidale?
Yes, it was in Armidale. Yeah.
So back then, sort of a more of a lower socio demographic, but still, you were able to make a profit out of that to move
It
forward
was.
too. And
Yeah.
I'm a Perth boy, and I remember Armidale. And you go when I landed in Melbourne, it took me a little while to get my head around the difference in Armidale in Melbourne, which is very high end,
Yes.
versus the one that we experienced in Perth. So you
Yeah.
bought this unit, 1979. What did you do to it?
Well, it was always going to be a cosmetic reno project for me, and that's exactly what I was after. Um, it was in completely original condition, and I think I had two owners at that stage in its lifetime. So when I got in there, I just pretty much straight away started working on it, gutted the garden, gutted the inside, knocked down some archways and saloon doors and that sort of thing. Ripped out the kitchen and the bathroom and just pretty much redid the whole thing from a cosmetic perspective. There wasn't any structural changes. So it was a real easy one for me. I did some of it myself and got in the tradies to do the good stuff and managed to make a tidy profit on that one. It was really good. It was around the same time that I met my partner, who's now my husband, Daniel, and he was renting at the time and he wanted to get into his own place. And so while I was renovating, I was spending a lot of time at his place and while the renovation was happening. So it was good. It worked out well.
Now, so that's the second, well, first house purchase being a villa,
Hmm.
and obviously the land was the first one. Did
Yeah.
you keep that property, Jason, or did you flip it?
I still hold it to today, actually.
Beautiful.
We kept it, so we leveraged off that, and Daniel was, as I said, ready to buy his own place. He was looking at a house and land package as well at the time, and we kind of put our heads together and just said, look, it's we've been together for a couple of years, and we thought maybe we'll do this together, and we'll be able to kind of bite off a bit more together, and
Yep, double household income. Yep.
yeah, that's right. And so I was still working, running my business and working full time as well at the time. And Daniel is an executive, so he was doing quite well financially at the time in terms of his income. And so we decided to put our heads together and look for something together. And I was at that time I was like, look, I'm just not about house and land packages. I could see that it wasn't the right pathway for me, and I was onto something that I felt like was working for me by adding value to a property with a renovation, and so I started looking for that worst house in the best street sort of scenario, something I could add value to straight away, and I was always trying to purchase it under purchase price as well. So it was a really hard search, but I was looking in suburbs like Applecross, Mount Pleasant. I'm a Southie, so I was looking around and so we landed on a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom split block in Mount Pleasant, which was a 90s sort of, the early 90s build. And it had been rented its whole life, so it wasn't in good shape. But structurally, it was beautiful. It had great architecture, really nice design, and 3 living spaces. So we were like, this is the one. We jumped into that one, and we got it for a bargain. and we got, I think it was about 50 or more under asking price at the time. So a couple of things were going through my head at the time. I was like, great, look, we've got something that we could work on here, and we're in a good suburb, and we've got plenty of scope to add value, but wow, this market seems like it's a really good one to buy. So maybe we should do that again straight away, because we got a good deal. So why not, just do it again? So we straight away just went, look, how do we add value real quick and then get back on into the market again? So we added an extra bedroom. We had a huge living area upstairs, kind of an L-shaped living area, and there was 2 more downstairs. We were like, we don't need all of this space. No one does. So we chucked up a wall and created a 4th bedroom, and we threw on an alfresco out the back, and got the house revalued, and straight away made a really tidy profit on it. And
that's the paper profit. Can I just get
yeah.
year of time? What sort of year are we talking here now?
So this was 2018.
2018. So
yeah,
you're listening to the podcast as well. You're doing everything we say to do in terms of don't go and buy a house and land on the outskirts. Come and buy something that's got a little bit of charm, a little bit of owner-occupier appeal. Keep adding value to them. Was there any type of rule of thumb about $1 down for $2 in return in terms of your budgeting for the renos?
Yeah, there was. I was looking at at the start a 10 to 15% investment on the reno, but the market was moving quite quickly, and so I should have stayed on the purchase price, but I had confidence that the market was moving in a direction that would allow me to spend a little bit more, and so I pushed our budget up. I realised that a higher end renovation would give us a better return, kind of really early in the piece, and so that was our goal. It was like, let's spend a bit more to make a bit more, and fingers crossed that would work. And I'd done all my research. I spent hours and hours and hours looking at all the different options and crunching the numbers. I was listening to you guys a lot, and so it all worked out. And I double checked it many times. And I was like, this is going to work. And
beautiful.
So we did start that reno, but we decided that we wanted to buy in that market. As I said, we were just like, let's just get something right now while we can, while the market's really good, because it looks like it's gonna go on its way up. So we had a look around, and we saw a 3x2 in Success, which is Coburn area, still south, and it looked like it was a little bit neglected. It was very, very new, less than, I think, just over 2 years old, and the lawns were unkept, and there wasn't many photos on the website. And so we were like, oh look, someone doesn't care about this property. Let's go and check it out. And we went in there, and we were the only ones at the home open. So we were like, oh look, I don't think this is like, whoever's selling this property hasn't made a lot of effort, so that it smelt like an opportunity. So we offered just over land value, and we got that offer accepted and over the line straight away. And so we made a really good profit overnight. As soon as we settled on that, we made a really, really good profit on that one too.
Was this in 2018 as well?
This is 2019, so early 2019. Yeah. So yeah, we bought towards the end of 18, and by the time it settled and we moved in, did a couple of things that we wanted to do to add value, then we jumped straight into the next purchase.
Because I was writing some things down. I was trying to get the Como purchase. It felt like you said about 30. I think you're a 1980 child, aren't you? So that's about 2010, was it?
No, it was 30. It was 30 when I bought the block.
The block was 30.
Yeah, that was when I started. That was when I started saving towards the block, and but by the time I bought Como, I was about 34, 35.
Okay, so that's about 2015. So you go Como 2015, you go Mount Pleasant 2018, you go Success in 2019.
Yeah. And so Success was because of the we got it at a bargain price. It was positively gearing for us from day one, so it was a good little return for us. And then COVID hit, like not shortly after that. It felt like I was planning a renovation, and then all of a sudden I had no trades and wasn't able to get anyone at the house, and so it was a bit of a nightmare at that point. So yeah, fast forward to early 2020, and I've kind of got a bathroom ripped out and a laundry ripped out, and yeah, so we couldn't have any trades at the time. We were living in the house, my poor family, through absolute hell. At one stage, we had no floors, and we had another lockdown, and it was just freezing in the house. It was real messy. But we pushed through it. My family are absolute troopers. We pushed through, and we renovated the house. And I think all up, it took about just over 2 years to renovate. And we did everything: kitchen, bathrooms, laundry, flooring, window coverings, paint. We ripped out the stairwell and replaced the stairwell with and the mezzanine with glass, and we redid the whole lot. So it was added the alfresco one first thing. We did the front yard, retaining all of it. Like, it was a massive, massive project, but transformed the house completely. And we made like a huge, huge profit on that one. It was just over $400,000 on that renovation. And yeah,
So
so
it was PPR, right? So you didn't have to pay
no
like
tax.
that was yeah, nice.
Yeah, so
These are all paper profits we're talking about, because obviously, have we still got that one in the portfolio?
no, so look, another lesson learned here. We were working with a broker at the time, and we wanted to hold that property ideally. And the house was on a half block, as I said. And although we converted it to a 4x2, it was a 3x2 to begin with. So you can imagine it was quite modest in terms of the living
Yeah.
spaces, and the block itself was, I think 380 square meters. We're both ethnic families. We both have, really big families. As I said, we had the 2 kids, and plus we had my mother-in-law, Jackie, living with us. And so we just wanted a bit more space. And so ideally we wanted to hold that, and then we had our eye on moving into, more suburban area and getting a bigger block and a bigger home. And so we had our eye on the property that we're in now in Leeming. And we had some friends that this was one of my best friends at high school. It was her parents' home. And so I'd spent a lot of time here after school, getting into all kinds of trouble. But they wanted to sell and downsize off market, and so we kind of approached them and had a chat, and mutually wanted to move forward together. But at the time, holding Mount Pleasant, with the market not really peaking yet, our broker wasn't able to get it over the line to hold Mount Pleasant and purchase Leeming. So it was a big lesson. Since then, we've kind of moved on to another broker, and we've realised that there are so many ways to skin a cat, and if you've got someone that really knows what they're doing and it's investment focused, they can kind of make things happen that others can't. And it's all about their relationships and their experience and their knowledge about, what your next step, and understanding what your next step is. And so with hindsight, if we kind of made that decision to choose a broker that was more in line with our goals at the time, we probably could have held on to that property. But
Are you talking about an investment savvy mortgage broker there, Jason?
exactly, yes, that's right. To quote you, yeah, an investment savvy mortgage broker, and it wasn't. It was a really harsh reality, because we didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of owning the home that we'd fallen in love with. It was a bit of an emotional purchase because it was ideal for us in terms of our family and what we needed. And so we ended up putting the house on the market. But we did make a really tidy profit, and I was I was a little bit concerned about the land value where we were, being that it was a very small block and it was a busier street, and we just had this beautiful shiny renovation, this beautiful new home that was very appealing. But of course, those things depreciate, and I was really mindful that that the block being as small as it was and on a busier street, that once the value of the build declined, that it might not be the right investment for us in terms of what we do with our money. So wanted to get into something that was a bit more substantial, more land, more a bigger house, and we felt that would be the better decision for us. So we did sell, made a tidy profit, and purchased our PPR now here in Leeming.
So what's the inventory look like now? So you've got, you've still got Como, you've got Leeming. It sounded like Mount Pleasant was the collateral damage of the mortgage broking advice. So what does the portfolio look like now?
So we still have Success. So we have Como, Success, and Leeming, and just about to make our next purchase. But so we held the only one we had to really let go of was Mount Pleasant. The one we've renovated, and so that was our PPR. We moved into
Right. I'm writing notes about that renovation, Ben, for the Success property. So I've clearly got to listen a little harder. So, but it was the Mount Pleasant one that you moved. So there's 3 properties, and what's the goal, mate? Because you've been listening to us for a little while. You know, it's all about accumulating just enough so that you can retire out the debt and create some cash flow. Does that resonate with you? Is that part of the plan?
Mm-hmm.
What's the North Star for you? What are you going for?
It is. That's the plan. I kind of inherited a family overnight, which has been the best thing that could ever happen to me. Never thought that would be possible for me. But fortunately, Daniel and his 2 kids have become part of my life now, and we're now married and a family. So, it's so important for me to be able to take care of them and not kind of go down the same path as I did as a kid, and have those conversations about how difficult it was. So it is about passive income, and it's about being able to have the freedom of choice when we're retired, and make that retirement age a decent one. It's tricky because there is more of us now to consider, and Daniel and I are pretty different in terms of how we spend and how we save and how we work money. So it's a
Have
lot
you
to consider.
combined household sort of spending together? Is that sort of now universal? You're running a sort of a budget system?
Yeah, we do. We've combined everything, and we're really playing on our strengths at the moment, which is where we've landed, and it seems to be working for us. Daniel's got a great deal amount of trust in me. We respect and trust
Complement
each other
really well.
Yeah, I think so. So that's a good thing. Daniel also balances me. I think about money a lot. I think about frugality a lot, and I'm quite happy to go without a lot of things, in terms of keeping the big picture focused. Whereas he's a little bit more about enjoying each moment today, which is a really nice balance for me sometimes. So he works super hard, and occasionally likes to experience joy now and have that instant gratification, not in a massive way, but just to enjoy the moments of the journey, on the way up. So that's a good balance for me, because for me I can be a little over focused sometimes.
So now you're well on your way. Congratulations to you and Daniel in terms of putting this story together. It's clear to say that maybe with an investment savvy broker, you may have been able to hold on to Mount Pleasant. That hasn't happened. We can't change the past.
Yes.
But what are some of the other sort of key messages that you want our community to take away from your story, Jason, in regards to, what are the things that you would like our community to sort of understand about what's possible when you apply yourself?
Yeah, look, I think, for me, adding value to a property, isn't for everybody, I think. Um, but it's the possibilities, just to think that, you could profit $400,000 on a renovation. I mean, obviously there was a market shift in that time as well, but still a very significant amount of profit, just by adding value cosmetically to a property. Like the scope of that is, a lot of people didn't believe me that when I was saying, look, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to start here, and I'm projecting that we sell around here, and or revalue around here, and people going, that's not going to happen. And I think it's important for people to understand that. Like if you understand how to purchase at the right time and make your money when you're purchasing, try and get a good deal on your property. Obviously, everyone's trying to do that, but try and manage that emotional connection to the property when you're buying it. We purchased Mount Pleasant, it was all about like that next step for us, and it wasn't emotional at all, even though it was our family home. And then, really going with the bones of the property and looking at, the rather than going with your taste and what it was that I wanted in a home, I was looking at the property going, how do I add value to this in the most cost-effective way that's going to complement the house? And it's not about me. It's about, kind of making the house, bring it up to its, former glory and then beyond. And so, although it's not for everybody, I think it's not as hard as people think. You can add value to a property, and you can do it in a really big way if you're smart about it. And for me, I don't think I would ever buy a shiny new property anymore. Ones with all the glitz and glamour that you walk in and it's all done, and all you got to do is put your furniture in and sit down and go, oh, this is great. To me, it's like a lot missed opportunity where I'm putting that money into someone else's future rather than, doing a bit of work myself, saving a bit of money on the purchase, but also adding that extra value for me to leverage off a bit later on. So, for me, it's about purchasing, making your money when you buy it, then adding your value, and then obviously capital growth as well. So those are the three things that I look for, and try and tick all those boxes. It's not easy.
Particularly in your town, in the lead up to the pandemic, in that decade, there wasn't a lot of market
Mm,
growth. So the fact that you were actually able to get in there and use your hands and be active and create equity through, some of the things that you were able to apply, I think that was important for that time as well. So that because some of the success story has been from the manufactured equity that you've created. So that's something to think about within markets that don't enjoy just that lifting growth as a market. My final question for you, mate, is
mm,
why did you say yes to coming on here? You've been listening to us for a little while. I put the call out, summer
mhm,
series, winter series. Ben and I have been doing this for some time, and we get enormous joy out of having conversations like this. But people get nervous, right? And why?
yeah.
What was in it for you to come and be transparent and tell us that there was no money in the early days, and tell us
Mm.
that you had a credit issue? Why did you do it?
Honestly, Bryce, it was because I have been listening to you, and all of your guests have been so wonderfully open about their stories, and I have taken so much away from those. I love listening to your updates, RBA updates, and your knowledge directly from the two of you. But I also get so much out of your guests, and how they're so transparent and they wear their hearts on their sleeve, telling their stories. I've learnt what not to do and what to do from them as well. I feel like I've had the same experience, and throughout your life, there's always lessons learned, and if you can afford someone else to not have to experience those lessons themselves and learn from yours, I think that's a brilliant thing to share. And I've really enjoyed being part of the community with you guys and your guests and all your listeners, and learn from that. And to be able to share my stories, it's a privilege, it's absolute privilege. And particularly for me and for Daniel, both of us pretty much starting a property journey in a big way in our mid-30s. I want people to know that it's not too late to do that. A lot of investors are starting younger, and that's brilliant. And I think that's amazing. The younger the better, obviously, but you can still do it. If you think it's too late, I feel like get on that horse now, knuckle down, have those conversations, the robust conversations you need to have with your partner about spending and discretionary spending and essential spending, and cut back on both. Like, do what you have to do and just make it happen. I think that's important for those older listeners to know as well.
Look, I think it's a powerful message, and the irony is that Ben and I are just regular guys having a swing as well. But a lot of people can, because of this platform, sort of say, "Oh, it's easy for them." But I agree that the stories that you get to share, I think, are more valuable. Hopefully Ben and I have created some frameworks for people to have in their head, so that when they hear stories like yours, they can make sense of your story through the frameworks that we've laid over the journey, right? Because the irony is you're in a house in Leeming, which is the suburb next door to my mum and dad's house, and we both went to the same school, and so there's not too much difference, right? Other than we're both action takers, we both actually have an eye on a longer time horizon, and we're prepared to do probably something that not everyone is prepared to do. So thank you, mate, for being so transparent, and it's fascinating. I must admit, it's fascinating for us to have a little listen to see what life's like for someone who's as talented as you are with your gifts around going and packing out stadiums and doing television shows and all that sort of stuff. So it's a privilege for us to get the opportunity to get insights into your world, every single one of our guests. So thank you for allowing us to do that, mate.
Yeah, and if I can build on that, the privilege is ours, right? Ultimately, for you to share your journey, and for all of those people who've come on the pod to share their message that inspires others, that's our privilege. We get to listen firsthand. We get to ask the questions, to dig out the gold that's in everyone's journey. So thank you very much, mate, for giving us that opportunity.
Thank you again for sticking around, mate. I 100% believe that there will someone be listening to that going, that just landed for me. That little piece of gold here, there, on your story, and not only property story, but how to get back up after disappointments in professional life as well. And you're still gigging in that around Perth, aren't you?
Yeah. So I have a regular weekly gig here at Fremantle,
So how can someone who's listened to this, who's in Perth, come up and say good day to you? Where are they going to find you in Freo doing that gig?
Friday nights at Benny's Bar in Fremantle from 9:30 till 1 till close. Every Friday night we'll be there. So our band's name is Common Crew, and we play R&B Fridays every Friday at Benny's Bar.
And if they mention the property couch, can they get their request put straight at the top?
I will buy them a drink.
There you go.
Let's do that. Best cocktails in Perth, I can tell you that. And
we don't want 400 people rocking up and saying, "Where's my free cocktail?" There.
Yeah. Let's remember, he didn't make any money out of Popstar. So
good problem to have.
Very good. Well, we're going to let you go. Thanks again on behalf of everyone here in the community for sharing your story. It was fun, mate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Well, there you go. What a story, Ben. There's a fair bit of ground we covered there, but from Stardom to profile to the disappointment to locked-in contracts to just getting on with it, Ben, and actually just building out a portfolio despite what's going on.
Yeah, I've got some notes here that I took away. Obviously, there's a lot of transparency in terms of Jason's story, and to believe that he was on this sort of pathway to a better future and in the passion field that he was in the industry, in the music industry, and then to have that carpet pulled from under him, but then to just basically have the resilience to bounce back, stay in the industry, keep doing what he loves doing. My other notes here say knuckling down. If you knuckle down, you put the effort in, you do your research. It's not too late. That one was also really, really important. And I think it's also worth putting into context his story around the timing of the renovations and being able to buy those properties in what I would call a depressed market. During that time, Perth was definitely down from its peaks, around that sort of 20% mark, around when he was first starting to look at that. So one of the things that's a really important message there when you are looking to do that type of renovation story, and he gave us a little clue when he said, we bought one of them for almost land value, basically got the house. So that is, to the point I'm trying to make here, Jason did have a really good timing phase. In a depressed market, he saw an opportunity, he renovated in that depressed market, and then ultimately he timed the exit on that property really well to get the $400,000 realisation. Now that's not always going to be the case, but that is about also thinking counter-cyclical. So we talk a lot about demand, supply, and getting into markets that we are confident are going to have short-term capital growth. But this is another classic strategy of when you can get into a market and you can basically think in terms of decades, not in terms of years. And that allows you to obviously buy in a depressed market, get a good buy, and get something that you can also add value to, which limits your downside risk. So that is also an excellent strategy. So to his point, he was confident in that strategy playing out, and on that occasion, it paid off in spades.
Good summary, Ben. I think that props to him for doing what he's done, along with his husband there, Daniel, taking on new challenges, new experiences, and also navigating. To his words were, differences in the way that we manage money, and there's that leaning on the trust that Daniel has in Jason, which I really liked as well. But I just think, Ben, so you can't imagine what it feels like to do something around music to large crowds, and then have that disappear. Footballers, and there's a bunch of people that do that, and then they struggle afterwards. But it seems like Jason's going from strength to strength, and then still obviously dabbles in his passion as well, in terms of that commitment that he does to gigging around Freo as well. So lots of great stories there. Made a comment that it seemed unfair what the parents were going through. So use that as a platform to say, well, I don't ever want to have that happen to me. I don't ever want to work as hard as them, and really has a clear plan on accumulating property so that he's living lifestyle by design. So well done. Again, Ben, I love it when people just come and be transparent and authentic and open to sharing these stories, because it will help others. So any parting words for you?
Well, it was more of, I think you just tapped in onto something there that I just, wanted to remind myself of, is that struggle motivated him to think about how he looked after money. And he said it a couple of times there, I really think a lot about money. And to be in the financial position that he's in, he's also, not only has he thought about money, but he's also acted that knuckle down type story. And so now he can, again, do some of his love work in terms of performing like he does on a Friday night down there in Fremantle, and do all that type of stuff, in the knowledge and the comfort that, basically they're also building quite a nice, comfortable wealth base for themselves. So they'll never have to worry about money again. And really, for a lot of people, what a lot of people want out of their money is what they've already got now, and more consistency of that when they do finish up working. And so that's another great message that came out of Jason's story today. So I just thought I'd also drop that in at the end of the show as well.
I like it. Part of the alumni, Ben. The Leeming Senior High School alumni, the Freo Dockers alumni. It's not very often that you get to chat to two people on this podcast who are Freo Dockers supporters, because let's be honest, I don't bump into a lot of people on this side of the country that are Freo Dockers supporters anyway. So good chat, Jason. I think it was well worth all of the experiences that you shared with us, and I think our community will agree, Ben. So we love Winter Series. We will never get sick of it. So, mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
There you go, folks. See you next week.